Now streaming. Disney Plus invites you to go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in an exclusive 6-episode docuseries.
I wanted to give something to the fans that they didn't expect.
The only thing left is to close the book.
The end of an era. And don't miss Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the final show, featuring for the first time the Tortured Poets Department. Now streaming, only on Disney Plus.
Morning decisions. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Welcome to the Dr. Raj podcast with today's guest host, Becca Spahr. Becca Spahr is a certified relational health coach who works with veterans and their families to help them find friendship, expand their professional networks, and build a sense of belonging so they can thrive after service. She grew up as a military kid and later served for 20 years as a U.S. Marine, learning that likability, authenticity, and attention can create belonging anywhere. Becca inspires her audiences through keynote speeches, workshops, and coaching, teaching them that connection is a skill that anyone can master. And now, here's today's episode.
Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Raj podcast. I'm your guest host, Becca Spahr. Today, we're talking about what happens when the pressure is on, the spotlight is bright, and every word matters. Whether you are facing a media crisis, delivering bad news, or just leading through uncertain times, today, we will be learning about how to bring calm confidence to those high-stakes communications moments so that you're not just reacting, but you're responding with clarity and credibility. Our guest today is Caitlin Gardner. She is the Chief Gardener and founder of Blooming Communications. I see what you did there, which is a boutique public relations agency where she leads communications, brand, and marketing efforts for both B2B and B2C clients. Caitlin, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Caitlin, can you start out just by giving us a little bit of an overview of what you do?
Sure. I have a 20-year career in corporate communications. So today I use that to help clients grow with calm confidence in high-stakes communications moments. So this could mean a variety of things, but through Blooming Communications, I have the opportunity to support our clients in a variety of sectors, everywhere from healthcare and wellness to retail and travel, and helping them navigate internal and external communications. So in today's integrated communications world, having clear communications and being clear on your messaging, being consistent, creating a culture where communications and transparency is welcomed is really something my clients appreciate.
And the world the way it is today, we are constantly communicating, whether it is face-to-face, the old-fashioned way, or on social media, or there's the nonverbal communication, there's the verbal, there's written, there's video now. There's just such a broadness to what communications can mean. I'm interested also in seeing if you can define for us what high stakes communication is.
Yeah. So high stakes communication is whenever the receiver is hearing it and it could mean an important conversation for them, right? So for leaders, in a lot of the leaders that I coach, there are conversations that they have every day, which for them may not be a high stakes communications moment. But for the person receiving that information, for the junior team member, perhaps a client, a patient, a customer, they might have a really high stakes reaction to that. So how, when they're delivering that information, can they use the tools of clarity and communications effectively to be able to make sure that their message is received if it is a high stakes communications moment. Alternatively, some of the leaders I support actually are facing external and internal high stakes communications moments, like you mentioned. If there's a crisis, if there's a media moment, if they're going to go live on broadcast in the form of a town hall to their team, if maybe they're in a transaction right now where things could get a little sticky, or there's confusion, or maybe there's a negative rumor in the office. How do we address those things confidently and transparently? So I help them navigate those through whatever means are necessary.
So with high stakes, that first of all, that's really insightful to think about that it might not be high stakes to both parties involved.
Yes.
It might only be high stakes to one. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
Mhm.
But then also, I would think it can be high stakes because it's like a negative thing, like you're reacting to a scandal or whatever, some kind of bad publicity. But I guess there could also be high stakes in a positive way too, where you have a moment that you don't want to waste.
Oh, 100%. For example, when I show up on stage as a professional speaker, that's a high stakes moment for me because this is me being vulnerable on stage. The spotlight's on. It's just me, and I have no screen or notes. So that for me is a high stakes moment. So I rehearse and I do the practices that I coach my clients on to make sure that they are prepared so they can show up with calm confidence. But for me, that is a high stakes communications moment. For most of the clients that I work with, it is possibly either preventing a reputation crisis or preparing for any scenario. So that way, no matter which way something plays out, that they are prepared, they have the resources that they need in case of a potential crisis or a misinterpretation, a viral comment gone negative. Sometimes it's online reviews and, some of them deserve a response. Some of them just need to be escalated and noted internally. Some things go and get escalated appropriately to leadership because they do need to be squashed or addressed. So there's a variety of things. And most of the clients that hire me are growth minded. They are focusing on, if it's their personal development or their team's professional development, they're looking on what's ahead. They're not looking to sit at the status quo. They're trying to think about how to communicate what's on the horizon, how to do more with video, more with AI, using things that are future minded. And I think those folks are comfortable feeling, okay, testing out new technology, testing out, they're less risk adverse. They're more like, okay, let's take a calculated risk. So with that comes proper communications. How do we roll this out in a way that the team will be okay with this change? How do we roll this out so that way, if it doesn't go exactly to plan, we're like, yep, that's part of the growth process. We're learning and failing forward. So a lot of the things that we explore are also just appropriate communications. So we avoid the crisis, right? We want to build up the positive reputation and set the groundwork that we are a growth-minded company, and that starts from the top very much.
So that sounds like the ideal client, somebody who comes in, they're growth minded, they're in the right mindset, they're not reacting, so they're being intentional about thinking about how they want to communicate before something bad happens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have the other kind of client where they come in because they're like already in crisis mode and they're like, we need Caitlin to dig us out of this mess?
Yes, I do have a variety of clients in a variety of industries. And mostly when there is something that's, when they're in crisis mode truly, and they're feeling emotional, they're feeling a lot of stress, they need to respond immediately. We need to think through what that is. And they call me because I can say, hold on, let's talk about this. I'm a third party.
Mm-hmm.
I've handled a variety of crisis in my past. So we say, okay, what is the right first step? Mm-hmm. And I have a vulnerability assessment that I take my clients through to say, okay, what is the risk? What information do I need to know? What do we know right now? Who are the stakeholders we're replying to? I have a communications and crisis playbook that we can evaluate and figure out within the next 2 hours, 24 hours. What are we doing? How are we cascading this message? My hope is that clients are coming to me before this and we're planning things ahead. But to your point, sometimes they call me and, they're like, man, this is a really sticky situation, or gosh, I should have been prepared, but I did not. And they're feeling, especially the executive team, or if it's a founder, they feel maybe attacked, or they feel really take it personally. And I can come in and say, this is a painful moment for you. Let me help you navigate that, because I show up with empathy and warmth. It's not a judgment. This is what we know. How do we respond and react? So I think that's because a lot of things have prepared me to do that. And one of them is because I didn't always react with calm confidence, to be honest, Becca. I used to have to be the loudest or want to respond really fast and not always think things through. So now I've been able to say, hold on, let's operationalize this. What do we know? How do we escalate this and say, we don't know everything, but here's what we can do. Here's what we can control. So having that framework allows even the most vulnerable client to say, hold on, can you just help me navigate this? Can you walk me through this? And showing up genuinely with empathy and care is usually actually one of the best ways that I show up for my clients.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I like the idea of a vulnerability assessment to sort of look at things, take a step back and look at things. How bad is this actually? What's really at stake? What are the points we need to hit? I feel like I could use that in my own life, like when I start to overthink things or freak out about something, because it's not always as bad as you think it is, maybe when you've got emotion, invested in it.
It's absolutely right. I mean, the emotion is the part of it, right? So when I come in and I'm a third party, I can come in and say, well, that's not emotional to me. It allows me to show up with empathy that it is for them, but I can take a different approach, right? So there's different levels of that. And, we can help from a communications lens. Do we need to work with IT? Is it a technology crisis? Is it a breach that we need to address to our target customers? Do we have to get back online within a certain moment? How much money are we losing every minute? That is the biggest risk here. The reputational risk of responding to an outrageous comment. Just because we're right doesn't mean that we have to respond, even though everybody wants to just defend our brand. So we can come in that way. Are the authorities involved? Are the proper teams informed? Does the board need to know about this? Does the C-suite need to know? Medical directors, whatever the proper chain of command is, how do we make sure that we follow that process in a way that is appropriate for the communications reaction?
These are skills that, really everybody needs to have, because even in your personal life, you deal with hard conversations or whatever, little whoopsies where you're embarrassed and you have to try to save face or, apologize, that kind of thing. But for entrepreneurs, having these skills early on in their career or in their business journey seems like could probably save some difficulty down the line if they already know what to do. And I know that you share some of these skills with young entrepreneurs or people who are interested in it at the University of Florida. Can you tell me about your work there?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a professor about entrepreneurship and also careers beyond the newsroom, because I'm a trained journalist and public relations professional. So I love being able to help support founders and entrepreneurs who are curious, because many of the communications roles of the future will be for entrepreneurs. Now, that doesn't mean that the students will turn into entrepreneurs themselves, but it's helpful for them to understand the ethos of an entrepreneur, that risk-taking, like, I have an idea, I want to bring this to life passion, because inevitably after they've launched their product or, invented something, they're going to need to tell that story. So that's when a communications professional can come in. So I love helping entrepreneurs. And my number one tip for them when they're starting up and it's a startup phase is to say, make sure you're documenting your story through visuals. Make sure that you have that picture of you getting the first check or inventing the first version of something. Even if you're like, this sucks, like it's going to get better. How do I build on that? So I think documenting through photos allows us to help tell our story in 5 to 10 years from now. So having those visual assets, building that content library for founders is really something that they love to do. It'll help them with their storytelling later.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I just saw a video the other day that was like, it was somebody who had this business journey, and it had a clip of them like really early on. I'm like, what were they doing taking video of themselves on like whatever, like you said, the first dollar they made or whatever. But yeah, so if you really are forward thinking about it, you're doing those things. I have to put that on my list.
Yes.
So that I'm doing it too.
It's so true, and I learned this early in my career because I worked for a big company out of Chicago, and they had this archive, this timeline of the last like 100 years or whatever. And they had these old store retail locations and black and white photos and historic memorabilia with their logo. And it showed how over the decades they evolved, right? And I'm like, wow. So when I join companies, we always look back in the archives and say, how do we digitize this? Now it's so much easier even to mock something up if we don't have it. But we definitely love every founder story. Every CEO says, oh, this was my first job, or somehow they're mentoring other groups and leaders and to humanize us all. To always be like, well, how did you start? We always want to understand, what was that initial spark that launched your career? How did you go from here to there? And a lot of times we launched there, but it's when we look back and we could see the stepping stones that we took. So when you're an entrepreneur, documenting those help tell your story. So prepare your future PR team. They'll thank me later by documenting your founding story.
I love that. That makes me think of like when you go into like a mom and pop restaurant and they have like, the story on the menu or the pictures on the walls. There's a vacuum cleaner store. It's in Tampa, actually.
Okay.
It has these like absurdly old, like 100-year-old vacuum cleaners or whatever they were back then. I don't know if you can call them vacuum cleaners, but they have them on display in there. And it's like an evolution of the vacuum cleaner, and kind of like they've been in business that long, which is pretty remarkable in and of itself. So definitely just brings interest to your business and your story, and it highlights your passion and your credibility too.
Yeah. And I think, one of the main reasons companies come to me is because they're either looking to change something, they're rolling out a vision or a mission, they want to increase their positive culture. So talent acquisition and HR teams are drawn to, what is our communication story? How are we attracting and being a magnetic brand that people want to choose, an employer of choice, right? That employee branding is such an important thing, that people feel seen and heard, and that they understand the vision of the leadership team. So I can attract and talk to different audiences in there. So for the executive leadership team, where are we headed? For the teams, this is where we're going. How are we doing? What are the skills you need to break that down? How do we communicate that effectively and cascade that to the team? And then as we want to attract people, from a talent acquisition or recruitment perspective, how do we bring in new people to our talent pipeline that follow that same vision and bring them along on this beautiful employee journey? I've had the pleasure of working at some of the top companies to work for in the cities I've worked in. And it's really given me an edge, because it allows me to say, these are the type, you're spending more time with the people you work with sometimes than our own family. So how do we make sure to invest in those people? How do we make sure to find and address things that might be a little itchy directly? How do we find other people's strengths so we can maximize our own? How do we give people the assumption of good intent, so that way we're not just always assuming negative about others? So all of these lessons I've picked up on my career path, and it has helped me as a consultant now.
You're speaking my language, because in my work, I don't work I don't work with companies usually as my main clients. I work with individuals to build their social wellness and their social fitness. And one of the things that I teach a lot is skills on how to make yourself magnetic. And so on a personal level, there are ways to do that so that people want to work with you. They want to be friends with you. They want to keep coming back for more. But what you're saying is that companies can employ similar behaviors or ways that they communicate to make their clients want to come back for more.
100%, because the best asset for the company is its people. That's the biggest asset that they have. Now, if you ask someone in finance, that would be, an expense. But I will say, from a communications and a culture perspective, human first communication is the equity that we have, right? Having this culture moat around the company. And by moat, I mean protecting the company and building up its positive reputation so it becomes this desirable entity that people choose to stay, right? And people are exiting if there's a toxic boss. People are exiting if it is not matching their values or their work style or their lifestyle. So I think, how do we communicate? How do we make it attractive for top talent to stay around? And if we introduce AI to that, how do we make sure that our teams are doing the top thinking? How do we make sure that they are having the resources in place so they can do their best work and feel good every day when they come to work?
This sounds like, and maybe it's my own ignorance, but this sounds like so much more than what I would expect from a marketing or a PR agency. I mean, I would think, I need to hire someone who knows how this works to help me, build my brand and build my website and, write copy and things like that. But you're kind of describing like a lot of coaching and education alongside with it. Is that normal for communications, companies to do that? Or is that just something at Blooming that you guys do?
It's definitely a specialty at Blooming because I have the opportunity to go deep with my clients and to really help them and understand them. I have intentionally designed my business to be able to come in as a strategic consultant and a fractional communications leader, where I help them determine if they need to focus on a revenue number or if it is an internal communications and eventually a media relations or traditional public relations experience. But you mentioned a website, for example. Websites of today are very dynamic. They have video content that needs to be written and shot and produced and have a smart narration. It has calls to action, which is a traditional marketing tool. It has, so many different things, visuals, especially with content being copied easily and ChatGPT being able to create different content. The story needs to be authentic and unique to each brand. And this is where the human experience is more than just a polished corporate speak. It's actually this authentic, human voiced, people-centered culture that we build, and I think connection, which is your topic, I think it definitely melds into this. I do think that communications and PR are intertwined with a variety of things. I think integrated communications from every aspect, again, from a people and influence internal standpoint to the C-suite, that all needs to be there. I also want to share that as a natural, I don't even know how to describe it, but mentor, like I love helping other people grow. And that is why I say at Blooming Communications, I'm the chief gardener and I help companies grow. So whatever that means for them, I do want to find their strengths and highlight their strengths. So for a variety of clients, it could mean different tactics and deliverables.
K-pop Demon Hunters, Haja Boys Breakfast Meal and Huntrix Meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja Boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is our larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
Right now at the Home Depot, shop Spring Black Friday savings and get up to 40% off, plus up to $500 off select appliances from top brands like Samsung. Get a fridge with 0 clearance hinges, so the doors open fully even in tighter spaces in your kitchen. And laundry that saves you time, like an all-in-one washer dryer that can run a full load in just 68 minutes. Shop Spring Black Friday savings, plus get free delivery on appliance purchases of $998 or more at the Home Depot. Offer valid April 9th through April 29th, US only. See store online for details.
Let's go back a little bit, back to the crisis communications or high stakes communications, because I feel like you probably have some pretty good stories about that. And
I'll share what I can.
Yeah. Well, could you give us a few snippets of maybe some times when it was like really, really high stakes or where somebody handled it beautifully or didn't handle it so beautifully?
Yeah. So I think a masterclass in crisis communications was definitely COVID. I was working in the cruise and travel industry and it was the spring of 2020. So like many of us, I went straight into crisis communications 101. Within 24 hours of the cruise industry shutting down, we had our CEO on camera with clear remarks. We pretty much built out a TV studio with the proper precautions, of course, but also at that time, we were able to immediately get information and cascade that to not only the travelers who were impacted, because literally the cruise industry was one of the first impacted by the pandemic and shut down and, huge regulations. We then were able to get her on national news, speaking out about the industry, advocating in the government and doing government affairs immediately. So really doing a lot. And it was all communications. Now, how are we able to do this so quickly? We already had the systems in place. We already had her camera ready. We had the equipment. We were able to translate and get to a TV studio very quickly in our homes. Now we're doing that naturally, but that was pretty novel at that moment. And it was really important to cascade messages. We created a crisis war room is what we called it, where we were immediately deciding who's doing what, how are we cascading this information, not only to our travelers at sea, but also to their families, to our travel advisors who are helping them. How do we get people back home safely? So that was one example that did really well. And you mentioned parenthood. And that time I had a 3-year-old at home and I was 8 months pregnant and I was considered geriatric pregnancy. So I was also dealing with a crisis in my own world because I was struggling with all of that. And my husband had just gotten a transition in his role. So we were swirling at home. It was swirling at work. And I needed to show up with calm confidence. This was a skill I had to learn and kind of figure out because I realized that the loudest person wasn't going to be the calmest in the room. The best leaders showed up with calm confidence and were able to be clear and considerate, and they weren't biting each other's heads off. In fact, they were showing up with grace. They were showing up with curiosity and leading to clarity, which increased everyone's belief in us and our confidence too. So that's where this all, that was one example of where this came from.
And then all of that you just described with the calm confidence of the leadership trickles down into the rest of the organization because, like you said, COVID's kicking off and there's people on ships and planes are getting shut down and, but to be able to see your leaders reacting in a way that is graceful and calm will help to make the organization as a whole feel a lot more confident and calm in whatever it is that they have to do next.
What I've learned in my career is that calm is contagious. It helps when people see a calm leader that they get to feel that sense of calm, that psychological safety to say, okay, I don't know everything, but at least we're working toward it. Or at least the smartest people on our team are aware of it. It's escalated. I can focus on what I need to do because I know that they're focusing on what they need to do. So this is where the assumption of good intent comes in to say, you know what, everyone is in the right position to do the best job they can. And this is when you need to have trust and reliance on that. And obviously hold each other accountable to live to that as well.
I know that in your other past jobs and experience, you've worked in the healthcare industry, and that piques my interest because a lot of the listeners of the Dr. Raj podcast are in the healthcare field. And so I wonder if you have any particular tips or just advice when it comes to functioning within that sector where we are talking about sometimes truly life and death situations. And where there is room for building systems that can lead to the best possible outcome when it comes to communications.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that in healthcare, many people get into it to help people. And if you're in that role, you already are familiar with having high stakes communications with your patients, with their families, making difficult decisions and communicating that even to your peers and respectfully doing that. When you have to master high stakes communications within a team environment, there's added dynamics. For example, is there a hierarchy, spoken or unspoken? How do we cascade messages and show respect to everyone, no matter their level? How do we communicate in this constantly changing world with greater openness about our challenges when we are struggling, when we need to have a vulnerable moment? How do we respectfully disagree or walk away if it's not appropriate, if it's not a productive conversation, but then don't forget to circle back and engage in a more productive manner? So healthcare teams are very unique because they're already dealing in a high stakes environment anyway. So when it comes to staffing changes or safety changes, leadership priorities shifting, or communications memos being sent out, how do we have real-time, honest, face-to-face conversation? And my number one tip is get away from the computer and have that face-to-face, even if that means virtually, but one-on-one, like have that honest conversation. And I think that is the right thing. So escalate quickly to say, hey, let's just chat. I really want to get to the bottom of this.
And thinking as you were speaking there, it made me think back to what we kind of started with was that high stakes communications can be high stakes to different people in different ways. And so whether, it could be in the healthcare industry, for example, breaking some bad news to a patient or the family of a patient, or could be, navigating like hospital administration, like you said, with like staffing changes and that kind of thing, mergers, all of that. Any other thoughts on specific to healthcare, how these skills can show up there and be useful?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of burnout in a lot of industries, but I think the caregivers of the world are definitely experiencing that, right? So they're so used to giving to others. So how do we recognize that within ourselves and say, my team right now, if you're a leader or if you're feeling that way now, how do I look for ways to improve morale, reduce our turnover, because we know that the impact of that is huge, right? We have to upskill and train someone new. We have to integrate a new person, and the cost is huge as well. So how do we reduce turnover and think through so we're not getting to the burnout phase, but how can we use communications, which is obviously something I'm passionate about. And in this case, internal communications, learning, development, upskilling, being clear about change that's happening. So that becomes a strategic partner for us. So we're actually working and planning and being intentional. And ultimately that ends up with better care and quality for our patients, but in making sure that there's reduction in friction among the team will help increase patient care in the long run.
And really, and applicable across a lot of industries, but I know in the
healthcare
world, things can be very fast paced. There's so much regulation that goes with it. Yes. So yeah, really, really complex environment there. So thank you for sharing that. Yes. Any other final thoughts on what people need to know, whether it's in their personal lives or in their professional lives when dealing with this?
I think the main thing is, as a business owner, whoever's the face of your company, so this is the frontline workers, sometimes that role isn't always trained as in the same way, right? So how do you make sure that they have the terminology, that they are aware of all of these things? This is why I say the word cascading, because maybe the senior leaders understand it, but they're not the ones in the front lines dealing every day with the person. They're not answering the phones every day. They're not interacting with your customer daily, right? You're dealing with a lot of people before you have that appointment with that doctor as a consumer or as a patient. So how do you make sure that every person on the team is able to communicate effectively? So this is where some standard scripts and understanding what is our value? Where are we headed? All of that is really important. So no matter your role, I would always look up and down the line and think through, how can I respect these partners that I'm working with and really be as strategic as I can with my communications?
In addition to working with clients of yours where you're teaching these skills, how else do you get this message out there to people who need to hear it?
Well, I get on stages all the time. So I am a member of the National Speakers Association, and I love working with companies and associations that bring in speakers, and I chat with them about all of these topics. I also have a Bloom framework, which is a 5-step process where we're able to think about the brand and how everyone can be a leader on that team to optimize the opportunities and create a plan of movement. So those are the 5 letters. I mentioned them all in the Bloom framework. And that's really, really great. So I love doing that. So welcome to any opportunities to get that message out to business leaders and associations.
And if somebody wanted to book you for a keynote, or I don't know if you do workshops, how would they find you?
Yes, I do both keynote presentations and workshops virtually and in person. And everyone can go to bloomingcom.com, and that's my website. And also my LinkedIn is very active, and that's Caitlin Gardner. And I'm a certified franchise executive. I help a lot of franchise businesses as well. So that's me on LinkedIn.
You have so much energy and clearly a lot of passion for what you do, to be I know you travel a lot too, getting your message out there to people. So I admire that about you. And I thank you for doing it because it is important for people to hear. And it's a skill that we all could build and do better at. We'll put all of this information in the show notes in case somebody wants to track you down. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us and with our listeners today.
Well, thank you so much. And that little COVID baby is now 6 years old. So she is my high stakes communications this evening. I'm sure bedtime negotiation will be a high stakes moment for me.
It always is.
Right.
All right, Caitlin. Well, thanks again for your time. And we look forward to seeing and hearing a lot more from you in the future.
Thank you, Becca.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dr. Raj Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then please make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave a rating while you're there. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. This has been a production of MedPrep to Go, and you can learn more at medprep2go.com. Hey everyone, Chris here from MedPrep to Go, and I wanted to ask you to please follow us on social. There may be links in the show notes, or you can find us at MedPrep to Go on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and now YouTube. We'd greatly appreciate it as we try to spread the word about MedPrep to Go and keep medical education accessible and affordable.